Have you ever stood in a room filled with people, dressed to impress, smiling politely, only to realize that behind those smiles lurk deeply rooted biases that could shatter the very foundation of a celebration meant to unite two families? Imagine this. A wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day in two people's lives turns into a battleground of silent stares, veiled insults, and one powerful act of love that changes everything. If you think weddings are just about flowers, vows, and cake, think again. This story will shake you, inspire you, and remind you why courage in the face of discrimination is always worth it. Camilla, a smart, warm-hearted woman with a spark in her eyes and a spine of steel, had always dreamed of a wedding filled with laughter, unity, and love. After 3 years of dating her fiancé, Darren, a charming, humble, and deeply principled man, she was finally planning her big day. The two met in graduate school, where they bonded over late-night study sessions, a shared love for jazz, and their passion for social justice. Darren came from a tight-knit family. He was raised by his grandmother, Mavis, a 78-year-old retired teacher who had seen the best and worst of people and still chose to live with grace. Mavis had survived segregation, marched for civil rights, and had stories etched into every wrinkle on her face. To Darren, she wasn't just family. She was history, love, and legacy, all rolled into one elegant woman. Camilla's family, however, came from a very different world. Her mother, Cynthia, had grown up in old money and small-town traditions. She was the kind of woman who believed she wasn't racist because she once had dinner with a black colleague, or so she liked to claim at country club luncheons. When Camilla brought Darren home for the first time, Cynthia plastered on a smile so fake it could crack. Her compliments were subtle jabs cloaked in politeness. "Oh, Darren, you're so articulate. What a strong handshake. You must come from good stock." Camilla noticed, but she was in love and hopeful. She convinced herself that Cynthia would come around. As the wedding date drew near, the tension thickened. Cynthia questioned everything Darren's side of the family did. "Are they comfortable with formal dining?" she once asked, eyeing the guest list. "Should we maybe seat them near the bar where it's more casual?" Camilla called her out. "Mom, you're crossing a line." But Cynthia, as always, dismissed her with a condescending chuckle and blamed logistics. It was easier to ignore than confront, or so Camilla thought. Then came the rehearsal dinner, held at an upscale vineyard with white table linens, string lights, and a 5-course menu. It was the epitome of elegance. Darren's grandmother Mavis arrived wearing a navy blue suit, pearls that had belonged to her mother, and a regal presence that turned heads. She moved slowly but with purpose, her cane tapping rhythmically as she walked. When she entered the room, people noticed, but not all in a good way. Cynthia narrowed her eyes, whispered something to her sister, and the two women exchanged tight smiles and quiet snickers. Mavis, with the poise of a queen, pretended not to notice. But Darren noticed. He always noticed. And when he watched his grandmother being ushered to the far end of the table, away from the rest of the group, a knot formed in his chest. Camilla noticed too. She walked straight to her mother and asked, "Why is Mavis sitting all the way down there?" Cynthia shrugged. She seemed more comfortable away from the music. Camilla saw through the lie. "She's almost 80, Mom. She should be up front where she can be part of everything." Cynthia, not used to being questioned, snapped, "This is my daughter's wedding. I want everything to be perfect." Camilla stared at her, realization dawning. To her mother, perfect meant excluding the very people who mattered most. That night, Darren and Camilla sat together under the stars, far from the guests, holding hands. "I don't want this to taint our day," she said. Darren shook his head. "It won't, but I won't pretend I don't see what's happening. And I won't let anyone disrespect my grandmother. She raised me. She sacrificed everything so I could be the man you love." Camilla rested her head on his shoulder. "Then we'll face this together. I promise." The wedding day arrived with golden sunlight pouring over a garden venue blooming with roses. A quartet played soft melodies, guests mingled in pastel suits and chiffon dresses, and champagne flowed like water. But underneath the beauty, the undercurrent of tension remained. Darren stood at the altar, handsome in his tailored suit, but his jaw was tight. He scanned the seats. Mavis was nowhere to be seen. She had been seated at the very back. A young staff member, clearly uncomfortable, had approached her earlier. "Ma'am, there's a seating adjustment. Would you mind moving to the last row?" Mavis, though surprised, didn't make a scene. She moved. But she knew exactly what this was. She'd lived through worse. Camilla, walking down the aisle, saw her immediately. Her steps slowed, her heart pounded. She looked to the front row, empty chair. Her eyes darted to the back, and there sat Mavis, dignified, alone, and almost out of view. Then she looked to her mother, who stood nearby with a self-satisfied smirk. That was the moment everything changed. Camilla stopped walking. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The quartet faltered. Camilla turned, walked off the aisle, and made her way to Mavis. Guests whispered. Cameras swiveled. But she didn't care. She knelt before Mavis and said, "You belong in the front row." Mavis looked up, eyes glistening, lips trembling. Camilla took her hand and led her back down the aisle, this time arm in arm. The guests rose in silence. Camilla seated her beside her father, kissed her cheek and turned to her mother. "Did you do this?" she asked, loud enough for the front row to hear. Cynthia flushed. "I just thought." "No," Camilla interrupted. "You didn't think. You acted." She turned her back and took her place beside Darren. What followed was one of the most beautiful, powerful ceremonies anyone had ever seen. Every word felt charged with emotion. When Darren spoke his vows, he honored not just Camilla, but Mavis. "You taught me to be kind, but never quiet in the face of wrong. I vow to protect that legacy, today and always." After the ceremony, Camilla took the microphone at the reception. The air was thick with anticipation. "Today was almost ruined by prejudice," she began. "But love showed up, and it showed up loudly." She paused. "We're not going to ignore the uncomfortable truth. Some people in this room made choices that reflected fear and ignorance, not love and unity. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. It should." There were no cheers, just silence, and then Mavis stood. She didn't need a mic. Her voice cut through the room with calm authority. "I've watched the world change. I've watched it stay the same. Today I saw both. But I also saw something I've waited decades to witness. Someone stand up, not just for me, but for what's right. And that is what gives me hope." Tears flowed. Strangers embraced. People who had never spoken to Mavis before lined up to thank her, to apologize, to listen. Cynthia, humiliated, left before the first dance. Camilla didn't chase her. That night, as Darren and Camilla danced under fairy lights, surrounded by people who had chosen love over legacy, Mavis sat at the edge of the dance floor, smiling with pride. Someone asked her, "Did you ever think you'd see a moment like this?" She answered, "I didn't think I'd live long enough, but I'm glad I did." Camilla and Darren didn't just exchange vows that day, they lit a fire. In their home, love would not be polite. It would be bold. It would speak out. And most importantly, it would always, always show up. What would you have done in Camilla's shoes? Would you have stayed silent for the sake of a smooth day? Or would you have stood up for what's right, even if it meant turning the wedding upside down? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your voice. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or just made you think a little differently about love, race, and what real unity means, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to rewrite history.